is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the altar again, and this time we are here with Robin of the Ocean. It is great to be able to talk with you. Thanks for coming on here today.
Yeah, no worries, man. Happy to talk to you.
Yeah, anytime, man, anytime. Last time I saw you, you guys absolutely killed it on the Catatonia run that I had the privilege of seeing. Great show, and it's great to be able to talk with you now with your new album Holocene coming out. Is this sort of like a continuation in a way of the Phanerozoic series that you put out prior, or is this meant to sort of like signify a new beginning for the ocean in a way?
It's a little bit of both, actually. It is kind of like an appendix to the Phanerozoic album series, which wasn't really planned for. We were initially thinking that Phanerozoic 2 would be the last one on that subject matter, but then, yeah, Peter came up, our synth guy Peter came up with these amazing ideas during the pandemic, like in mid lockdown, and sent me those. And initially, I didn't even think that this would be ocean because it was very synth based. It was kind of different, but it did have that oceanic vibe to it. And I was really inspired by that and started laying drums and guitars over it. And yeah, so we had a really cool creative exchange for a couple of weeks. And by the end of it, it was clear that this indeed sounded like ocean and very much like a continuation of where we left off with Phanerozoic 2, which was already going into a bit of more dark electronic in a bit of more of a dark electronic direction towards the end of the record, and this is where Holocene continues. So then the decision was made that we're going to do one more album with this with this along this conceptual backbone, basically. And so it's kind of a closure for sure, because it's definitely going to be the last one, and at the same time also a bit of a new beginning, because it's new ground for us in many ways. It's the first album that didn't start with a riff or an idea that I came up with, but actually was mostly conceptualized by Peter's ideas that I then took. So it was the first time I wasn't working with a blank page, but with something that someone else had done. And that was really cool and really, really interesting and inspiring for me personally also.
Well, it's funny you mentioned like I heard you say this sounds like ocean in a way, but like when you could play me like a few minutes of a song, like I could tell like because Fog Diver I know was instrumental your debut, but then you go to Fluxion which has its own unique sound, and then Aeolian to Heliocentric. It really seems like every ocean album almost like has sort of its own plays by its own rules and has its own
Oh yeah.
vibes. So, is it fair to say that maybe trying new things and bringing new elements, whether it would be going instrumental or bringing in some synth elements, it's fair to say that there's really no rules with the making of an ocean album, right? It's very flexible to bring in new elements.
It is indeed. I mean, we're in the lucky position where we can pretty much get away with almost anything right now, and that's a great privilege. In the beginning, it wasn't always like that. I remember when we realized when we released Fog Diver, which was instrumental, and then we released Fluxion, which had very low, heavy guttural vocals. A lot of people were complaining, like, "Oh, what's this? You know, this doesn't belong there." And this was a kind of an ongoing thing when we released Heliocentric, which mostly had clean vocals. Everyone was complaining that this is not metal anymore. So for many years, people had a hard time dealing with the fact that every one of our albums is kind of different. But by now, it seems that our fans love that about the band. You know, that there is a certain vibe that, of course, is recurring throughout all the records, but at the same time, there's always space for something new. And for us, that's just absolutely integral to keeping it interesting for us. I mean, this band has been going on for over 20 years, and if I had been making the same record over and over again, I probably would be working in real estate now or something. You know, like I would just get bored. And by allowing us to experiment, explore, and see where like our own like our personalities and also our musical dispositions lead us, and you know, like not planning that but just like letting yourself be carried away, was something that has been very important for us, and that has taken us to places. And this record is a good example for that, because again, it was something that we really didn't see coming.
Is it like, does it start off with a preconceived vision? Do you go into the studio or into the songwriting process with a vision in mind, or like a idea of what you want it to sonically sound like? We could get into the concepts in a second, but like, do you have a preconceived vision, or is your songwriting process very improvisational and almost kind of like rolling the dice to see what sort of comes?
The only record that really started with like a perfect master plan was Palladium. Angel. I mean, that one was written basically like with the idea in mind of what this should be, you know, a record that's like a journey from the surface to the bottom of the sea. I wanted this to like turn out in a certain way, like to get heavier towards the end as you're progressing towards the depths of the deep sea, and to get slower and like lower in tuning. So that record was written with the conceptual idea in mind already. All other records, it was always the music first, and then once I started writing lyrics, I started thinking about what I want this to be, really, you know. So it's so in a way, the actual songwriting process is, I wouldn't say it's very improvisational. It's constructed, composed music for sure. For all of our records up until now, up until Holocene, I was the one writing them. On Phanerozoic 2, there's already two tracks that Paul wrote, actually. It's Miocene and Oligocene. And but apart from that, pretty much every other ocean record has been me composing songs, and now it's been Peter and me doing things together, you know. But so it's not, I wouldn't say it's improvisational. It's always been me sitting down, or now Peter sitting down at home alone, like working out shit. Mm-hmm. And I think this is kind of, I mean, there's obviously no right or wrong. You know, every artist finds their own approach to writing music, and I have a lot of respect for a lot of bands that just jam out riffs in the rehearsal space. But for the ocean, that has never really been the case. It's always been a very intimate process of, you know, someone sitting at home alone and like trying out things in a studio environment, and then figuring out later, how are we going to do this live? And pretty much every ocean record has been written like that.
With the concept that you have in mind, in a way, is this concept more or less kind of like, is your own personal life and your own personal experiences invested into these concepts? Because in the end, we are what we create as artists. Or, you know, with your usages of Latin words, you know, Phanerozoic and, you know, anthropocentric and, you know, a bunch of other albums that I'm not going to try to destroy in pronunciation, are these concepts more or less kind of like external elements, or like more external sources of inspiration where you're not bringing too much of yourself into it?
I guess writing lyrics and coming up with album concepts is a similar process as writing music, although a lot of times for us it's completely separate. But it's also like, I just love having sort of a backbone to go along and to explore, you know, that like a conceptual theme or whatever. And I've always been interested in philosophy, and also in paleontology and geology. I actually studied that as well. So it's always been part of my field of interest. So it's not me sitting down with a book and coming up with weird terms that nobody can pronounce. It's actually stuff that has relevance to me in my personal life. And somehow I always felt it works well with the type of music that we're doing. I mean, initially, the first record with this kind of like paleontological or like Earth history background was Precambrian in 2007. And back then, it really came from me just like trying to visualize the music that I had been writing. And I saw these prehistoric landscapes, you know, and like just like volcanic eruptions and these like barren landscapes. And I felt that very fitting for the music that I was writing. That I was like, okay, maybe that should be a record theme, you know. So this is how it initially started, and then it just went to places from there, basically.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to like this concept that you address in it, why do you feel that the style that the ocean has, with your very many different sounds and stuff, why do you feel like this is sort of like the best style of music to bring in your sort of conceptual ideas? Because concept albums have been explored through all subgenres of metal, whether it will be Porcupine Tree or Fear Factory or Mastodon. Like, it seems to be Project 86, a metalcore band. So it almost seems like, why do you feel that this style is the best to demonstrate your concept?
That's not a conscious decision. I write the music that I write in, like I said, in complete disregard of the concepts. The music is always there first, and then I start thinking of, you know, like a context to embed it in, and to how to approach it lyrically. But the music's always there first, and the music is the most direct expression of who I am as a person and as a musician. And it's just something that comes out of this weird black box that is the creative zone. You know, there's like things going in and things coming out, and what happens in there nobody really knows, and it's always been a mystery to me, but something I find very exciting. But yeah, when I maybe that was easy to mistake when I said earlier it's constructed and composed music. It is, but at the same time, it is also very intuitive. Like when I start writing and I have an idea, it's taking me to the next step naturally. It's not that I sit there and I try out like 350 different possible transitions to a part. It's once I have an idea that resonates with me personally, it's flowing automatically. And this is a very intuitive process and a very kind of emotional process almost, so kind of like opposing the constructed nature of the songwriting process. It's really weird. I honestly don't fully understand how this works myself, also because sometimes you're just not in the zone, and you can sit down and try to create something and you're just not getting anywhere because you're not in the right mindset. And at other times, like I wrote Pelagial in less than 2 weeks basically, and I was just working every day for hours on it, and everything just happened. And like for me, I know there's a couple parameters that are important. Like I have to take myself out of my everyday life environment and go to a place where I can really just be by myself and enjoy the serenity of nature and the ocean, like ironically, in order to get into that writing zone. And then things just happen, and this is the most beautiful part of it, that you don't really know what it is and you don't really know where it's taking you, and it's like a journey that begins then, and ideally it doesn't end in a dead end but in a record. And luckily this happened a couple times with this band already.
Well, I've always said that the Ocean is like the thinking man's metal band, which I put into like a category. I almost make that its own little subgenre. Like there's certain bands like I would consider obscura to also have like their own sort of like thought provoking conceptual elements behind it. But it's funny you even mentioned, because I even think your name, the Ocean, provokes thought, because I've people call you the Ocean or the Ocean Collective, and I've always wondered if like I know that you would answer to both. If I introduce you as the Ocean or the Ocean Collective, it would still have the same sort of meaning in terms of how we talk about the band. But would you say that like the Ocean and the Ocean Collective, is there a specific reason why like you sort of have these double meanings? Is it almost kind of like a double meaning within the band name in a way? And does it sort of tie into the elements that we hear and see in the album titles?
I guess so. I mean, initially we picked that up because in the early days of the band we were organized more loosely, more like a collective, like an open collective of people contributing, rather than a fixed lineup of always the same people. So we had like at times where we had like 20 people that were somehow in and out of the band at the same time. We had like 4 different guitar players in the band at the same time, but we usually would only play with 2 of them live. But it was this kind of like revolving door, open lineup policy. So this is where it initially came from. But then since 2009, 2010, since the Centric albums, that consolidated into more of a firm lineup, actually already with Aeolian. For many reasons, I finally felt like I found the right people to work with for the time being, and also like having this open lineup basically resulted in us rehearsing a lot and not playing much, because the more people you have involved, the more you need to rehearse, and you actually get better when you rehearse with the same people for a while and play shows with the same people for a while, not if it's always someone else and you have to always adapt to that person and start from scratch in a way. So I didn't want that anymore. And then so the band consolidated to like a more firm lineup. At the same time, there were always people that were important for the band that were not always on stage with us, but that contributed something to it. The artworks, the videos, the live visuals, the lighting, all of which are very important for creating that impact that isn't an Ocean live show basically. And so nowadays we refer to these people as like the Ocean Collective. It's like the people that are very important for the band, but that you don't necessarily see on stage or not on every tour. We have a cello player and now brass players that are very important for the Holocene record, actually, that we work with in the studio. We may play live with them at one point or for a special event, but they're not an integral part of the band. Someone like Martin Quamme, who's in charge of album artworks and has been for the past 4 or 5 records, is extremely important for our creative vision, but you will never see him on stage, So the collective around the band is a lot of people that contribute a lot without people directly noticing, and this is what we refer to with this.
And maybe also the fan base as well could be part of that sort of collective element as well.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, of course. I mean, we got a lot of cool ideas from from fans just like asking us for things, or like yeah, like putting a certain thing in perspective and asking the right questions sometimes helps you to understand what you do yourself a little better, you know. So of course that is also quite important, and we're very happy and very lucky to have such an incredibly supportive fan base by now. I mean, the first time I realized that was in 2010 when we got robbed on tour with the Dillinger Escape Plan in Spain. They basically pulled us over on the highway with fake police IDs and stole like $6,000 of merch money, and that was like the total income we had on this tour. You know, like we were totally fucked, and we asked people for help. So everybody who ordered at the Pelagic shop, which was very young back in those days, had the option to donate like $5, you know, towards this cause. And within like a matter of 3-4 weeks, we had all the money back. And that's when I realized, fuck, this is amazing. Like we have this incredibly supportive fan base that really love what we do and that helped us out in this very shitty situation, you know, and that's really cool. And a lot of people, like we have now with Pelagic Records, we have a vinyl subscription. So people can subscribe, pay a monthly flat rate, and they get everything we release on vinyl. And that's like people who really trust what we do as a label, and also, you know, it's obviously very closely related to what we do with the ocean. And yeah, that's really great to have that, and we're very thankful for that.
That's awesome. And I've met plenty of your dedicated fans at the Catatonia show who were just so touched by your music. And you led me perfectly into the next question too, because in the end, even though you do have your conceptual nature behind the ocean, in the end, art is open to interpretation and for us to experience in our own way. But do you think that a listener's experience or their own individual interpretations of the band can maybe add a layer of context or a layer of meaning to the album after it's already been made?
I think that's a very beautiful way of looking at it, and very important. I mean, art is only relevant if it has relevance for your personal life, you know. And if you are too strict with guiding people how they should interpret your songs or your lyrics, then that kind of like ruins it for them, because they need to have their own way of looking at things and you know, find their own meaning and their own relevance in it. I do keep most of the lyrics rather abstract, although the conceptual frame is kind of clear. Most of the actual lyrics are kind of abstract and metaphorical in many ways. And that for me is very important, to allow for people to find something that they find meaningful, you know, without telling them, hey, this is what this song is about and you have to understand it this way. No, it shouldn't be that way. We should, art should be like not a blank canvas, but like a canvas with something on it, but that also allows for a lot of projection on behalf of the viewer to see things in it that he or she finds meaningful and interesting. I think that's very important.
And when it comes to also, you know, going back to that collective element of the ocean in a way, because, you know, in the end, like the music has so many different elements to it. Like when I think the first ocean album I heard was Aeolian. That was the first time, and it's because I was learning guitar at the time, and I was learning the Aeolian mode in a way, like Phrygian or Dorian, which I thought was actually going to be like the future album titles. I thought, oh, the next album's going to be called Phrygian or something like that.
It didn't come from that. Aeolus was the Greek god of the winds. That's where the album title came from, actually, not from music theory.
Okay. Oh.
But yeah, it could be. But that's exactly what we're talking about. Me telling you now, I'm ruining it for you. You know, so.
You're not ruining it for me at all. But it's funny. Now I'm interested. Did Pythagoras rip off Aeolus in a way? Like he's so unoriginal. Pythagoras was the one who came up with all that music theory, and he couldn't think of any other name, so he just named him after gods. This could be a interesting story. But with your different elements that you incorporate, I was just so shocked to hear how the solos are morphed and the different vocal styles and the different forms of instrumentation. But, you know, in the end, a band is a collaborative effort in a way. So is it better if everybody really is in the same headspace emotionally or feeling the same way about a song when writing together? Or could your different opinions and your different reactions to the music and different ideas actually play a role into your very experimental sound?
Well, on this record, I think it's a little bit of both. It's very important, obviously, that you share a certain mindset. You know, that you're able to let yourself in for something, and that you have this common ground where you feel like, okay, this is interesting, and what the other person is contributing maybe isn't what I had in mind, but it's it's opening up new doors. So this is like where, like how writing ideally should be for me. So it's very important to have to find that level, and to also allow yourself to let yourself in for what the other person has, like what other doors that person is opening for you, and to like try, if you find something, if you walk through them. So yeah, I think it's quite important to let that happen, and that only works if you know these people very well, and if you obviously have a lot of things in common, and I haven't, like, writing this record with Peter, I have never even once been at the point where I was thinking, wait, this is weird, or this is not right, or this is like, whoa, like, this is challenging. No, it always felt very natural. Like whatever he was coming up with instantly pointed me in a certain direction. I was like, this is cool, I'm going to do this and that with it. And what I threw back at him was something he totally didn't expect. But again, it was the same case. It was like, this actually makes a lot of sense, and this is how we kind of like bounced ideas off one another. And that's a very rare privilege. I mean, I've also played in some other bands, and where it wasn't like that. And, I think this essentially it boils down to just being on that, like having that same mindset, being on that level, because this is what you personally like, this is what resonates with you, and finding someone to share that with. It's like in a good relationship, it's like you're probably not shaping someone after your model. You're probably out finding someone that is by herself or himself in a certain way that speaks to you and that you find interesting. And with musicians or music, it's like that too. You're searching for like-minded people that you don't have to explain things to, that you don't have to say, hey, this is why I do this, that you just look at and you throw an idea at them and you're like, you got me, and yeah, I got you.
Well, what I find fascinating too is this is like a debate I like to have with artists now. Like when it comes to the inspiration and cultivating ideas, is inspiration really something that can be sought out? Can you look for it, especially from your educational background, and you're bringing in these Latin terms in a way? Is inspiration really something that can be sought out, or that creative energy and that inspiration to create, it's just something that just has to strike you? You really can't find it; it just comes to you.
Yeah, I think the latter is the case. Probably, it is this mysterious, almost primal force, that is just happening, and like watching it happen and experiencing it happening is a beautiful thing. It's not something you can construct. I think you could put yourself in that situation or in that position where you have plans to make a record with someone you think you're really akin with, or that you have a lot of respect for musically, but then you end up realizing it just doesn't work because like you're in different mental positions. So it is there is still this unpredictable element. Like it has to strike you like lightning, or it doesn't, although in theory everything should be set for that. It's just not happening. So in the end it comes down to that. It's something that is not fully plannable or predictable or executable. There is this element of chance and like the power of the gods involved, that yeah, that is just very important, I think.
The power of Aeolus, the god of winds.
Exactly.
And I have two more questions for you. I got the most difficult one up next, and I think when it comes to any band I ask this question to, I think there's no band more appropriate than to ask you. How do you know when you're finished with a song?
Well, that's a tough one. I'll give you one example, because I have to think about it first to really find an answer to your question. So Jurassic Cretaceous, the longest track we ever wrote, the second track of Phanerozoic 2, that's a song that was almost never finished. I've been working on that track for more than 3 years, on and off, and it never got to the point where I was like, that's it, I'm done. And so I put it to rest. And at one point, I always started coming back to it. So there was something in it that I thought was a very, very valuable substance that I wanted to expand on. But I always ended up in these dead ends that, where I just realized I have to stop. And well, it took over 3 years until I reached that point where I was like, okay, this is actually good now, and it's getting close to being finished. And after reaching that point, I still actually shortened the song a fair bit. Like I kicked out a couple parts and a couple of repetitions. But yeah, that was an extreme example. It took a very long time because I just never reached that point where I thought it's finished. Other songs are written in a day, and you just have the logical kind of like sequence of parts that takes you to the grand climax, and that you have a cool way to end the song, and you're confident and you just know that this is it. So that's also again something that you can't really plan. But there are, like, when I spend too much time with a song and I don't get to that point, I force myself to quit and then to revisit it later, because there's nothing worse than just getting stuck in a loop and trying to make something work that doesn't, you know. And usually, like with Jurassic Cretaceous, it was like that too. I got to that point 5 or 6 times where I was like, nah, okay, whatever, cool, let's let it rest, you know. And eventually I found a way out of the problem, you know, and found a way to end the song and to bring it to a shape that that was fulfilling for me and that I thought worked out great. But it was a long process, and had I not been able to just let it rest and do something else, I don't know if it would have ever gotten finished. So I think that's quite important, to not force yourself when you're in this dead end, to not force it, you know, to just be like, okay, whatever, I'll do something else now, you know. And then you may write another great song, and that one that you started with isn't finished, but you can go back to it later, you know. And just to not put any pressure on yourself, I think is very important, and just let things happen in the creative zone, and not have expectations like I have to produce a song per day or a song per week, or, you know, and then have this weight of your own expectations on your shoulders. I think this is the worst for actually being productive creatively. You have to be free of that, and just also accept failure is very important. Like, I spent like days and weeks exploring routes that led to nowhere, you know, and to crucify yourself over it and say, oh, what a waste of time is the worst thing you can do. It's an integral part of the creative process to say, okay, great, I just spent the last 3 days chasing a ghost, and it's like, it doesn't fucking work, you know. And to laugh over it and just be like, all right, you know, I'll work on another song next. I think that's very important to be able to do that. And I think I've been quite good at that. I never really got stuck for a long time in this creative desert that a lot of artists are talking about, you know, where they have like just like lack of inspiration. They feel like they can't really do anything. I think it's a matter of how you treat yourself in that process to avoid that. And if you have a good strategy, then you won't get stuck in that zone.
Yeah, I think you achieve a real nice level of artistic freedom when you accept that maybe some things were not meant to be.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the final question I wanted to ask you is it's kind of like a combination of both the live setting, but also tying back to the meaning and the catalog of the Ocean. Because, you know, when you play live, you know, you're playing with different bands, eh? Like 1 minute you play with Summer Slaughter, and then you've also played with Catatonia. So, like, you've played with, like, a variety of different tours and different bands. And then, you know, you have to bring in a set list, you know. So 1 minute you have to do songs from Phanerozoic, and then you got to do Hallucinogenic, and then Anthropocentric, etc. So when you are diving in through many different parts of your catalog and going through many different spaces in time, does that A, bring another layer of meaning to the material, and does it also kind of put you back in time? If you play a song like Fluxion, does it put you back to who you were in 2004, and so on and so forth?
Dude, we haven't played Fluxion songs in like 15 years probably, or 10 years, and I
Never
would
say
actually
never.
very much like to do that again.
Yeah,
I have a
20
bit of
years
a
of it
hard
next
time.
year.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, it totally does that. Like, when I start playing tracks from another era of the band and of my personal life, of course, it brings back that time, you know, and it makes you think about the things that were shaping you at that time and that were important for you at that time. That can be a really beautiful thing. Um, Unfortunately, the last 5 years of touring with the Ocean, we've really mostly focused on the Phanerozoic records and Pelagial. We did a Precambrian anniversary tour a couple of years ago, So that album we also explored deeply, but anything before that we haven't really played any songs of Aeolian or Fluxion. And I would like to do that again. I mean, I remember playing City in the Sea in Hong Kong. There's a video on YouTube actually, and it was a crazy night. There were so many great memories attached to Fluxion and Aeolian and touring with these records. And I think at least some of the songs still have relevance and meaning, and it would be very interesting to see how the band with the current lineup would interpret these. But I have a bit of a hard time convincing my bandmates also, because they were all not in the band back then. So of course for them the newer stuff has more relevance because they were part of recording it and like even writing it to some degree. So yeah, it's and when you have usually you have like an hour set time, or when you headline you can do an hour and a half. We have like 11 records, that's a combined probably like 10 hours of music or something like that. So there's so many songs, and so little space to actually play them. So to relearn something very old is always a bit of an effort that not everybody wants to take. But I do have plans for revisiting some Fluxion and Aeolian tracks and giving them some contemporary polish, and just bringing them up to where the band is nowadays. And I think that would actually be very interesting. And for me now, I used to be very sick of playing some of these tracks, like City in the Sea we played a million times. The Origin of Species of Heliocentric was always the last song of the set for many years, but now we haven't played it in 6-7 years, and now it feels fresh again. So sometimes it's also cool to just let a deadbeat song rest for a couple of years, and then feel the fire again to revisit it and play it.
We would love for that to happen. I mean, I think it would be great to revisit that old material in a way. For the diehards. I mean, you're always going to have those one diehard fans who want you to play like a demo even before the Fog Diver era. So
Oh yeah.
But I think that would be great to be able to experience some of those old ones. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time, for such an awesome conversation. It feels so great to finally get the Ocean on the show. Is there just anything else with the release of Holocene that you would like to promote? We got 2 new singles out. What else could we be expecting from the Ocean in the future, if you are allowed to say at this moment, of course?
Well, obviously, right now we focus on Holocene. Also, I should say that there is a parallel record by our synth guy, Peter, who, as I already told you, was very involved with the writing of Holocene, which is kind of like a parallel electronic record that takes some of the musical ideas from the main album and like kind of revisits them in a different, more electronic context. We're going to release that together with the main album as part of a box set. And we're also going to premiere one of those tracks, I think, in 2 weeks from now. So listen to that as well. It's interesting, especially after you've listened to the whole Holocene record. You will see lots of similarities and parallels, but also some new perspectives on that record. Apart from that, the Holocene record coming out May 19th, we will take a little break from playing shows and touring. We just finished a tour in Europe here with Carnival. And we've pretty much been out for the last 6 months nonstop. Like, we left on August 24th. We just got back now. We've only been home for like 2 weeks in between. So it's been a very intense last year. We played 155 shows in the year. And now we're taking it a bit slower until the fall. And then we will go out in Europe. And we're also planning to come back to the States. I think after doing 2 support tours with Leprous and Catatonia last year, I think we're going to be headlining. We would really like to play like a proper Ocean headline set in the States, and we haven't done that since 2008. I think was our first time touring the States, and that was also like a headline tour. It made no sense at all. It's the first time ever we were headlining. Yeah. But yeah, ever since after that, it was like either a support or a co-headline scenario, or Summer Slaughter we did. We supported Between the Bird and Me in 2011, Devin Townsend in 2011. And then, we didn't come over for the last couple of years. So I think it's time for a headline tour now and see where it goes.
We would love for that to happen. Please make that happen. But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with the Ocean Holocene. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Right on.